take you live back to the House for a series of votes.
Following order. Ordering the previous question on H Resolution 487 by the yeas and nays. Adoption of H Res 487 if ordered. Motion to suspend the rules on H.R. 1254 de novo. Approval of the journal de novo. The first electronic vote will be conducted as a 15-minute vote, and the remainder of the votes in this series will be conducted as a 5-minute vote. The unfinished business is the vote on ordering the previous question on House Resolution 487, on which the yeas and nays were ordered, and the clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Calendar Number 96, House Resolution 487, Resolution providing for consideration of the bill H.R. 1633 to establish a temporary prohibition against revising any national ambient air quality standard applicable to coarse particulate matter, to limit federal regulation of nuisance dust in areas in which such dust is regulated under state, tribal, or local law and for other purposes.
And the question is on ordering the previous question. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote.
After a brief recess, the House returns for a series of 4 votes. This first one, a procedural vote. Previous question vote on the rule for a bill that would prohibit the Environmental Protection Agency from regulating farm dust. The administration issued a veto threat against the bill yesterday. This is a 15-minute vote. The rule for the bill will allow for an hour of general debate and 8 amendments to be considered. This first vote, 15 minutes, and the remaining votes will be 5-minute votes. Lots of hearings on Capitol Hill today. We're covering a number of them, including the Attorney General testifying on the Fast and Furious gun operation. That's live now. You can follow that on C-SPAN 3, although it's likely it'll break up for a bit for this series of votes on the House floor. We're also covering today, this morning, the meeting of the 2 Appropriations Committee, the joint meeting between the Senate and the House, looking at 2012 spending and wrapping up the rest of the 9 remaining spending bills. Also this morning, we'll take you now to a hearing with John Corzine, set to testify later this morning before the House Agriculture Committee on the collapse of the MF Global company. And they're hearing from members of the Commodity Future Trading Commission at this hour. We'll show you as much as we can during this vote, with the caveat that they may break too for this series of votes on the House floor.
Even though they're not doing it on their account, they're doing it basically on my account. If there's a loss suffered because they decided to invest that in something that turned out not to make me whole, whose responsibility is that?
Well, it's really management's responsibility. Whether there's liability or not, I don't know. Then that is something, obviously, we would be looking into.
So, obviously, there's 3 ways my account can be diminished. One is I make an investment and I lose my money, or somebody illegally transfers money out of my account for other purposes, or they for liquidity purposes, the cash management tool they used didn't make me whole. Is that correct?
Potentially. It's probably not just your money, but the money in the pool for customers, if that happened.
Yeah. So if the pool shrunk, then we're all... Yeah.
If I could just clarify for the record that investments in foreign sovereign debt by an FCM are only allowable up to the amount that that customer posts a foreign currency with the FCM as collateral. So it's to prevent the FCM from having to take on currency risk.
Okay, that's an important point. Thank you, Ms. Summers, for that information. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chairman would note to the committee that we have a series of votes that's begun. I would ask if the gentleman from California, Mr. Cardozo, would like to be recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you,
and then at that point, we'll stand at ease until after the vote series. The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Summers, did the CFTC coordinate with other regulators leading up to the MF Global bankruptcy? For example, did the CFTC consult with FINRA and the SEC when they forced MF Global to change its capital treatment of its foreign sovereign debt positions?
That would not be part of our oversight, no.
Okay. Well, I'm looking ahead a little bit, and in the written testimony that we've received, from Mr. Corzine. On page 11, it indicates that he had a series of meetings in June or calls with the SEC, CFTC, and FINRA, and perhaps other regulators. And it goes on to talk about August 15th when he met with the SEC to question FINRA's requirements that they increase their capital requirement. And then it talks further about, on September 1st, that MF Global was still sort of not happy with the fact that they were going to have to increase their net capital, and yet they filed the required documents with FINRA. During that time, the federal government and the different agencies involved in this, you weren't coordinating at all?
The increased capital on the broker-dealer side would be something that we would receive notice of from the BDFCM. So we were made aware of that issue by MF Global in a report that they're required to file with us monthly.
So that, earlier in your testimony, you indicated that you really didn't know about this until a few days before all of a sudden everything unraveled, yet there was reports that indicated there was some problems going on here.
They were required to post more capital on the BD side, and they did. So although they reported being undercapitalized for July because of the increase in their capital required by FINRA, they did post that capital. So, for instance, we may then look at the house proprietary trades of MF Global on our side to look at the risk exposure that they have, to look at what kind of collateral they're holding.
Did you look at any of those things?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And did you find any shortfalls when you took those views of their accounts?
No, sir.
Our financial system has traceability protocols. When money is transferred from account A to account B, we can trace that, correct?
I'm not familiar with, I assume that that's true, I guess I should say.
Okay. My point is, at this time, is anyone in your agency, can you tell us why we can't find the money that's supposed to be in MF Global's segregated accounts?
As I stated earlier, I think that we can't overemphasize the complexity of the books and records of MF Global. The amount of accounts and transactions are enormous.
I understand. But frankly, either we have to be able, as regulators, to do that, or we have to throw up red flags and say that these things are too complex and we're going to have to do a better job, because ultimately we're put in place to protect the public interest. And if we lose confidence in these markets, it's going to affect our entire economy, not just the people who lose the money in a one-time trade. Others won't want to go in and invest.
I don't want to suggest that we are not making progress. Certainly we are making enormous amounts of progress every day, and there is no doubt that we, at the end of the day, will know where all of these transactions were from beginning to end. That is our job.
How many companies would you say are engaging in transactions that are too complex for us to understand on a daily basis?
I also do not think that they're engaging in or engaged in transactions that are too complex for us to understand. It's just tracing the amount of different accounts and the transactions from one place to the other.
Will your agency be coming forward with protocols that will change and make easier our ability to trace and understand on a more timely basis?
I think that there is no doubt after this is over and at the end of the day when we know exactly what happened that there is going to be a lessons learned. There will be policy changes that we'll want to come to this committee with for your consideration.
I would suggest that's a good idea. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair would note to the membership we're in the first of a series of 4 votes. When we return, Mr. Conaway will be next, followed by Mr. Scott. The committee stands in recess until the conclusion of these votes. Please promptly return.
Well, you can see the House Agriculture Committee breaking up, taking a recess for the series of votes that continues on the House floor. Just began, actually. This is a 15-minute vote. Previous question on the rule that would prohibit the EPA, a rule for a bill that would prohibit the EPA from regulating farm dust. So this first vote, 15 minutes, and the remaining votes will be 5-minute votes. We want to let you know that that hearing in House Agriculture is likely to be a long one today. John Corzine is set to testify, and we are covering that hearing all day long. You can follow that on cspan.org. We'll also have it later for you on our program schedule. Also this morning, we're covering the hearing with the Attorney General testifying before the House Judiciary Committee, though that hearing, too, has taken a brief recess because of this series of votes. I'm sure they will gavel back in once this series is underway. Is complete, and the hearing will continue live on C-SPAN 3. On the House floor, the first of 4 votes, this 15-minute vote, a procedural vote ahead of the vote on the rule for a bill that would bar the EPA from regulating farm dust, the administration issuing a veto threat against the bill yesterday. So 3 5-minute votes will follow this. If the rule passes, it's an hour of general debate, and 8 amendments will be considered. At this hour in the U.S. Senate, they're holding the cloture vote, a procedural vote on the nomination of Richard Cordray to head the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They need 60 votes to move ahead. Senator Harry Reid tweeted just a short while ago, quote, "This is the first time in Senate history that a party signaling it will block a qualified candidate because party disagrees with existence of the agency." A reminder that you can follow members of the House and Senate through our website with our list at twitter.com/cspan. The first of 4 votes on the House floor. House Democratic leaders met this morning with President Obama. The White House announcing this morning the president will be in North Carolina next week. He'll be at Fort Bragg speaking to troops to thank the military for the lengthy commitment to the war in Iraq. White House reporter Mark Knoller tweeting at this hour that Speaker Boehner challenging President Obama to agree to House bill that would extend the payroll tax cut and approve the Keystone Pipeline project. Following the conference meeting of Republicans this morning, Republican leadership came out, spoke to reporters about that expected bill. We'll have a look at it while this vote continues.
Morning, everyone. We had a great conversation with our members about an agreement that we would move a bill that would extend and reform unemployment benefits, that would extend the payroll tax credit while preserving the Social Security Trust Fund, and would also include some of our jobs initiatives, such as the Keystone Pipeline and Boiler Mac. You know, the President says that American people can't wait on jobs. Well, guess what? We agree wholeheartedly with the President. The Keystone Pipeline project will create tens of thousands of jobs immediately. It has bipartisan support in the House and Senate. It's pretty clear that the President has decided to push this decision off for a year, conveniently, until after his next election. Well, the American people can't wait, as the President said. And at a time when the American people are still asking the question, where are the jobs, I think this is a bipartisan proposal that the President ought to endorse.
If the President is serious about his commitment to economic growth and jobs in this country, he'll sign this bill. This bill doesn't have everything in it that either side wants for sure, but from our perspective, this represents a bill that does make some progress. It continues to change the culture of spending to one of savings here. This bill does ensure that we abide by the principle that we want people to keep more of their hard-earned money. And this bill does have some incremental steps towards continued efforts at economic growth, with the tax provisions in it for small business, with business expensing and accelerated depreciation. Again, if the President's serious about his commitment to join us, to work together on the things that we can agree on, then he'll sign this bill.
We just came out of a very strong conference, one that we have been continuing listening to the American public. They want to be able to keep more of what they earn and protect Social Security. They want to be able to create jobs. And they want to be able to see Washington work together with both parties. That is exactly what this bill does. If this President would stop putting politics ahead of people, put people ahead of politics, he will actually pass it and support this bill.
Every month that the President has been in office, unemployment has been at, near, or above 9%. The President's economic policies have failed. We have not, in this economy, seen job creation. Mr. President, we will have some of your ideas in this bill, but maybe it's time to try some of ours. Do not veto this jobs bill.
Couple of questions.
Mr. Speaker. In terms of support for the payroll tax bill, a number of members we talked to seem to be more optimistic. Do you think that they are more on track on getting an agreement here?
I think our members received the discussion very well. And while I don't do vote totals, Mr. McCarthy does, I feel confident about our ability to move ahead.
Speaker Boehner, is repatriation a part of this bill, and do you and Mr. Cantor agree on this bill completely?
Mr. Cantor and I agree on the issue of repatriation, and we agree that this is not really the right place to do that bill. As much as we'd like to do it in the arena of overall of our tax code, it's probably the best place to do it.
Speaker, how is this bill paid for? Has that changed?
No. When you see the pay-fors, the bill is fully paid for, fully offset, so that we are not jeopardizing the Social Security Trust Fund. We'll be moving it next week.
Is there any movement if the President sticks by what he says, which is he does not want the Keystone Pipeline on this bill? Is there any movement on your end, or do you let these things expire?
The Keystone Pipeline project will put tens of thousands of Americans to work immediately. It has bipartisan support in the House and the Senate. And as the Prime Minister of Canada said yesterday, Mr. Harper, this is a no-brainer. Thanks.
House Republican leadership following the conference meeting this morning laying out some of the broad outlines of their payroll tax cut bill, which the Associated Press says aims for a vote next week. They say the measure has been in the drafting stage for more than a week as House Speaker John Boehner and other leaders try to coax lawmakers to support a payroll tax cut extension that critics say has not contributed to job creation. One official who attended the closed-door conference meeting said lawmakers responded particularly favorably to a provision that would assure construction of an oil pipeline from Canada to Texas, despite a veto threat from President Obama. And again, that's from this morning, leaders just after the conference meeting. Well, back live on the House floor, this is the first of 4 votes, and 2 of them related to the EPA farm dust bill, a bill banning the EPA from regulating farm dust, drawing also a veto threat from the administration yesterday. If the rule passes, it will allow for an hour of general debate and 8 amendments under that rule. Over on the Senate side of the Capitol at this hour, they're wrapping up a vote, a cloture vote on the nomination of Richard Cordray to head the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and moving forward with that nomination. It needs 60 votes to move forward, and you can follow that on C-SPAN 2. Across the C-SPAN networks today, we're covering a number of congressional hearings, some of which are in recess, at least temporarily, for this series of House votes. One is the Agriculture Committee hearing. They're going to hear from John Corzine, former senator, former New Jersey governor, and the head of MF Global. And they're talking about the collapse of that financial firm. That'll resume. We'll have it live at cspan.org. We're also covering the Attorney General, who's back again on Capitol Hill testifying on the ATF's Fast and Furious gun operation. That's in recess. It'll resume, and it'll be live on C-SPAN 3. And our cameras are covering the hearing today, which will be between the 2 Appropriations Committee, the joint conference meeting, over the remaining spending bills for fiscal year 2012. And we'll have that for you later in our program schedule.
This vote, the yeas are 241 and the nays are 173. The previous question is ordered. The question is on adoption of the resolution. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. And in the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker,
Gentleman from Colorado.
on that I request a recorded vote.
Recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 5-minute vote.
This is the vote on the rule for a bill that will bar the EPA from regulating farm dust. The bill would get an hour of general debate and 8 amendments to be considered. They'll also vote in this series on a bill that would bar the sale of certain synthetic drugs that imitate the hallucinogenic or stimulant property of drugs. And that also will be a 5-minute vote. So 2 more 5-minute votes will follow this. Off the floor of the House and Senate, lots going on to finish up work for 2011, and that means taking care of 2012 spending. The joint conference will meet today, appropriators from the House and Senate, and that meeting set to get underway actually at this hour, and we are covering that. C-SPAN will be there. Also today, the House Republican Conference met, and they talked about the payroll tax cut legislation, which looks like will be coming to the floor next week, according to Speaker Boehner and to the Associated Press report this morning. The Republican leaders previewing the legislation to extend the Social Security payroll tax cuts and long-term unemployment benefits. They write that the measure has been in the drafting stage for more than a week, as the House Speaker and other leaders try to coax lawmakers to support a payroll tax cut extension that critics say has not contributed to job creation, and a veto threat against that has been issued by the White House.
yeas are 249, the nays are 161. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The unfinished business is the question on suspending the rules and passing H.R. 1254 as amended, which the clerk will report by title.
Union Calendar number 196, H.R. 1254, a bill to amend the Controlled Substances Act to place synthetic drugs in Schedule 1.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? So many as are in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for a recorded vote.
Recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. Sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
This is the third in a series of 4 votes. This one's on a bill that would bar the sale of certain synthetic drugs. 5-minute vote, one more 5-minute vote after this, although they could voice vote that. The next vote is a vote on the journal, the official written record of the previous day's activities. So it's very possible that could come to a voice vote. Over in the Senate, they just wrapped up the cloture vote on the nominee, Richard Cordray, to head the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. The vote failed. They needed 60. The vote there was 53 to 45. Congressional Quarterly writes about later in the day that senators are likely to reach agreement that would move up the latest in a series of test votes on measures aimed at extending payroll tax relief. The majority leader filed cloture yesterday on the motion to proceed, but has indicated the vote is likely to come today to avoid a Friday session. CQ writes that in the Senate, the latest Democratic proposal would reduce the employee share of the tax to 3.1% for 2012, leaving the employer-paid share at 6.2%. On the House side, as far as that goes, the Associated Press writes about the measure that the House Republican Conference discussed this morning. They write that in addition to extending the Social Security payroll tax cut and benefits for the long-term unemployed, the House measure, the Republican measure, has been broadened to avert a threatened 27% cut in payments to doctors who treat Medicare patients. All 3 items carry a December 31st deadline for action, and also a deadline for action for getting completion of the 2012 spending bills. The House and Senate Appropriations Committees, the joint conference is meeting today, and that meeting should be underway shortly. Our cameras are there. We'll have coverage of that later for you in our program schedule. Live coverage today of 2 hearings. The Attorney General testifying on the Fast and Furious gun operation. That'll resume shortly, and that's on C-SPAN 3. And also resuming shortly, the hearing looking at the collapse of MF Global. Former Senator and New Jersey Governor John Corzine will testify when that resumes. You can follow it online at cspan.org.
17. The nays are 98. Two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the question on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal, which the Chair will put de novo. The question is on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. Gentleman from Georgia.
On that, I ask for a recorded vote.
Recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. Sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
And it's the last in a series of votes ahead. General debate on a bill that would prohibit the EPA from regulating farm dust. The White House has issued a veto threat against that legislation. Just happened in the Senate a short while ago by a vote of 53 to 45. The Senate has blocked the nomination of Richard Cordray to head the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. President Obama will be coming up in about 15 minutes, according to the White House, and speaking to reporters at the Brady Press briefing room. We'll update you on our coverage plans for that, but that's set for 11:30. And the Senate continues. Look for a possible vote later on this afternoon, a test vote on payroll tax cut legislation. You can follow the Senate on C-SPAN 2. We're also covering today and about to get underway the House and Senate negotiators meeting on the 2012 budget, the 2012 spending bills rather, and that'll be live at cspan.org, as is the hearing on the MF Global collapse. John Corzine will testify in just a bit, and on C-SPAN 3 getting underway shortly or resuming shortly, the House Judiciary Committee hearing with the Attorney General on the Fast and Furious operation.
are 312 and the nays are 94, with 1 voting present. The journal stands approved. For what purpose the gentleman from Michigan rise?
I would ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks on the legislation and to insert extraneous material on H.R. 1633.
Without objection, so ordered. Pursuant to the House Resolution 487 and Rule 18, the Chair declares the House in the Committee of the Whole on the State of the Union for the consideration of H.R. 1633. The Chair appoints the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Womack, to preside over the Committee of the Whole.
You ready? The House is in the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for the consideration of H.R. 1633, which the clerk will report by title.
Bill to establish a temporary prohibition against revising any national ambient or air quality standard applicable to coarse particulate matter to limit federal regulation of nuisance dust in areas in which such dust is regulated under state, tribal, or local law and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the bill is considered read the first time. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Upton, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Waxman, each will control 30 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself 2 minutes.
The gentleman is recognized.
And Mr. Speaker, I would ask that we have order in the House.
Committee will be in order. Would all members please take their conversations from the floor, clear the aisles, clear the well. Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, no question, from the largest manufacturer to the smallest farmer ranch, not enough businesses are thriving in this economy. The recovery has been slow and weak. Job growth has been anemic. Continuous rollout of expensive new regulations has only made it harder to get the economy back on track. And that's why the House continues to approve bipartisan legislation addressing costly EPA rules. And that is why I support this legislation, the Farm Dust Regulation Prevention Act. This bill achieves 2 important goals: regulatory certainty in the short term and common sense for rural America in the long term. The bill retains the current coarse particulate matter standard for 1 year, a position that Administrator Lisa Jackson from EPA has embraced with her plans to propose maintaining the standard. And it offers regulatory relief to rural America by recognizing that states and local communities are better equipped to monitor and control farm dust. EPA would no longer be in the business of regulating rural dust except in cases where it is not already regulated and the benefits of EPA regulation outweigh the cost. Opponents of this bill insist that it's not necessary and that rural America has nothing to worry about. But the voices of rural America tell quite a different story. Listen to the American Farm Bureau Federation and all of its state affiliates. Listen to the National Cattlemen's Beef Association and over 185 other organizations who collectively represent a significant portion of the rural economy, including Michigan and across the country. These organizations believe that this bill is necessary, and so do I. The bill makes clear that the lead role in regulating nuisance dust should rest with state, local, and tribal governments, not the EPA. This is a smart step for a lot of reasons. For one thing, state, local, and tribal governments already address rural dust issues. For another, dust issues differ greatly from location to location and thus are not well suited to a one-size-fits-all federal approach. Further, these levels of government do a much better job than the federal EPA when it comes to weighing both the cost and the benefits of various options and choosing a path that is cost-effective and achieves the greatest benefits. Finally, under this bill, in the absence of state, local, and tribal regulation, EPA may step in and regulate nuisance dust if the case for net benefits can be made for it. This bill is a common-sense bill that removes a regulatory threat to economic growth and prosperity across rural America. I urge all my colleagues to support it, and I reserve the balance of my time, and I might ask that I would ask unanimous consent that the balance of my 28-some minutes be put under the control of the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Whitfield.
Without objection, so ordered. Gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Over the past year, Republicans have brought to the floor one bill after another to weaken the Clean Air Act and eliminate EPA authority to protect public health from dangerous air pollution. The House has passed bills to nullify EPA's rules on air pollution from incinerators, power plants, cement kilns, and industrial boilers. But the bill before us today breaks new ground. It would block EPA from taking an action that EPA has no plan to take. This bill is called the Farm Dust Regulation Prevention Act of 2011. Well, that's a misleading title. EPA currently does not regulate farm dust, and they have no plans to regulate farm dust. EPA Administrator Jackson told Congress that she will propose no change to the current air quality standard for coarse particles, which have been in place since the Reagan administration. This bill belongs to the False Advertising Hall of Fame. It is not really about farms at all. Its real effect is to exempt industrial mining operations and other large industries from regulation under the Clean Air Act, and it threatens to overturn the particulate pollution standards that protect families in both rural and urban communities. Section 3 of the bill exempts so-called nuisance dust from any regulation under the Clean Air Act. It then defines nuisance dust incredibly broadly. The definition covers both coarse particulates and deadly fine particulate. It covers particulates from earth moving, which means industrial mining operations, and from activities typically conducted in rural areas, which include cement plants, smelters, coal processing plants, and other industrial activities that are common. During the committee markups of this bill, the Republicans amended the definition of so-called nuisance dust 3 times. This shows how poorly drafted and broadly worded the definition really is. But they voted down an amendment to clarify that the bill only applies to agricultural dust, and another amendment to clarify that the bill does not apply to mining activities. They even voted down an amendment to preserve EPA's authority to regulate emissions of arsenic from copper mines and smelters. One supporter of the bill is the Kennecott Copper, which operates one of the largest open-pit copper mines in the world. The company's mining activities are the single largest source of particulate pollution in Utah, and a big reason why the 1 million residents of Salt Lake County breathe unhealthy air. This bill would exempt all particulate matter pollution from the Kennecott mine and all other mines from the entire Clean Air Act. Let's be honest. The reason industrial mining operations are pushing this bill has nothing to do with protecting family farms. The bill would also make unenforceable the national air quality standards for both fine and coarse particulate pollution. Particulate pollution causes aggravated asthma attacks, heart attacks, respiratory diseases, strokes, and premature death. Reductions in particulate pollution under the Clean Air Act account for some of the largest public health benefits produced by the Act. Gutting these standards would be radical and devastating. The American people support the Clean Air Act. People want clean air. And over the past 40 years, the Clean Air Act has brought us dramatic air quality improvements. But House Republicans are intent on undoing these achievements. In bill after bill, for one industry after another, the House has voted to punch holes in the Clean Air Act. It has voted for more weather-altering carbon pollution, more toxic mercury pollution, more arsenic and lead pollution, more particulate matter pollution, more sulfur dioxide pollution, and more nitrogen oxide pollution. In fact, the House has voted 170 times to undermine our nation's environmental laws. Over 60 of those votes were to dismantle the Clean Air Act. I urge my colleagues to protect clean air and the health of all Americans and oppose H.R. 1633, and I reserve the balance of our time.
Gentleman's time is reserved. Gentleman from Kentucky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. American farmers, ranchers, and other rural businesses, like many other sectors of our economy, have faced an onslaught of EPA regulations. Now, we all support the environment, but our economy is struggling today, and every regulation adds additional cost. The Congressional Research Service recently reported that agriculture has been facing new Clean Air Act greenhouse gas standards, engine emission standards, National Ambient Air Quality Standards for ozone and particulates, Clean Water Act permitting and other requirements, Superfund reporting requirements, regulations for disclosure, permitting, and other regulatory requirements relating to the use of pesticides. And until recently, the dairy industry faced ambiguity about whether milk and milk containers would be subject to EPA oil spill prevention regulations. We have 2.2 million farms in America, employing 1.8 million people, providing 5% of this nation's exports. And we need to do everything possible to make it easy for them to do business and still protect the economy. Today, we're going to consider H.R. 1633, the Farm Dust Regulation Prevention Act of 2001. At a time when rural economies are struggling, this bill provides certainty that farmers, ranchers, and other rural businesses will not be burdened with costly and unnecessary new dust regulations from Washington, D.C. As one might expect, a reasonable and common sense measure like H.R. 1633 has garnered 120 bipartisan co-sponsors. I now would like to particularly thank and commend the efforts of Representative Kristi Noem, as well as Representative Leonard Boswell, Representative Robert Hurt, and Representative Larry Kissel for their tireless efforts on behalf of rural Americans and this bill. Now, our bill makes clear that the lead role in regulating so-called nuisance dust rests with state, local, and tribal governments. And the bill defines nuisance dust to include particulate matter generated primarily from natural sources, unpaved roads, earth moving, and other activities typically conducted in rural areas. In some ways, it's ludicrous we're sitting here debating about EPA regulating dust. And I might say that we have 197 organizations supporting this legislation. Now, why do we need the bill? Well, EPA has been considering more costly, stringent PM10 standards. It is true that the EPA Administrator, Lisa Jackson, recently announced that she would not propose new regulations, that she would retain the current PM10 standards. But the problem with that is, when they finalize a standard, it's uncertain whether EPA will finalize a standard that imposes greater costs to rural businesses, and we all know that many of the regulations and EPA environmental protections today are decided by the court system. So even though Lisa Jackson says she's not going to do anything, lawsuits can be filed requiring her to do certain things. So this legislation simply provides certainty. And I might also say, because the science does not support the regulation of coarse rural dust, EPA itself proposed in 2006 to exempt this dust from their national ambient air quality standards. And the Integrated Science Assessment for Particulate Matter at EPA said for long-term effects of coarse particles, there is next to no evidence in support of long-term health effects. So I would urge all the members to support this legislation, and I would reserve the balance of my time.